Hi, folks. This is Don Meisner with the North Country Fishing Report. You know, I've told you before that I will watch some of these national fishing programs just to try to get some information, some tips or so forth that I can pass on to all of you. And I was watching Bill Dance's show, and his whole show was on using a plastic worm. And why is a plastic worm so wonderful? And I've said this before, if you had to pick one thing to fish with, if you're a beginner and you could hook it properly and put on a plastic worm, it's about the best thing you could use. But why? Why do fish love worms? And Bill says, well, I want to tell you before we use this why this is so effective. It's called an annelid. Now, maybe some of you have never heard of an annelid or what it is. And I was kind of one of those people. I'm thinking, okay, there must be creatures underwater that look like this for the fish to prefer worms over almost anything. And so I'm thinking, okay, let me look up and find out about an annelid. Well, when I looked up an annelid, it appears that there's 22,000 different species of annelids. These underwater creatures, worms, leeches, earthworms, there's so many. But what I didn't realize is that there's so many creatures underwater that are wormy, that look like a worm, are a worm. So it isn't just the fact that your angleworms get washed in when it rains from the shoreline and they get washed in the water and the fish eat them. Sure, that's one of the cases because fish love anything like that. But I think it's so interesting to find new things. I've spent my whole lifetime fishing, and I never took the time, I guess, or the thought pattern or whatever to think why these fish love worms so well. I'd heard as a kid, well, they wash in on a rainstorm or whatever, and the fish love them. And that was good enough because if I put one on a hook, I could catch fish. And that sort of set the stage for me for so many years. But I find this so interesting. And the other thing that came from my research about this is I was looking at different examples of annelids, is I saw these they didn't even look like worms, but they were creatures underwater, and I say creatures, they were beings that were, leeches were a big deal, but there were so many others, little fat things and so forth that fish eat, and it made me understand why all these soft plastics now that we get, they're made in so many different shapes, and I've thought to myself, why do the fish hit some of these things? I've never seen them before. Well, just because I haven't seen them. There's so many of these organisms that live underwater that the fish see. That's part of their world. They know what's in their world. I don't. I just know of some of the stuff. So it's interesting to find this out and to realize that the options that we have to fish with, the soft plastic options now, are so vast. And I used to think, why do fish hit all these? They certainly don't look like anything that they'd ever eat, but I guess they do. And so if you ever hear of an annelid again, you will think about fishing and you'll understand why I took the time to pass this on to you. Until next time, folks, this is Don Meisner with the North Country Fishing Report.